too much to try to make you into something you're not. I love me too much to settle for who you are.
That's the part that always makes me cry.
I can change her mind. I'll fly to New York tonight. Do you have her address?
Alright. Can I get you something to drink?
No, thanks. Yeah, hi, American Airlines reservations, please.
You sure? I got all my boys here. Jack, Johnny, and Jose.
Maybe Poquito Jose. Yeah, is that show Raven Back Ribs?
Yeah, happy stuff.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm not gonna make her Steve come and join us here. If you have your phones on, could you please turn them off or put them on silent while the service is on? Thank you very much. I'd ask if we could all stand.
Darling, you're with me, always around me. Only love, darling, I feel you under my body. How many times have you heard someone say, if I had money, I would do things my way. But little they know that it's so hard to find one rich man in 10 with a satisfied mind. A friend when you're when my life is over and my time has run out. My friends and my loved ones, I will leave, there's no doubt. But one thing's for certain, when it comes my time, I leave this world, oh yeah, with a satisfied mind. One thing's for certain, when it comes my time, oh yeah, I'll leave this world with a satisfied mind, satisfied mind.
Please take a seat. On behalf of the Bulldogs Football Club and Steve Folks' family, I want to welcome you here in the midst of our sadness as we come to celebrate and pay tribute to Steve, a life well lived. My name is Ken Clendenning, and it is my utmost privilege to lead us through this time of celebrating and honouring the life of Folksy as we farewell and say goodbye to him. We gather as family and friends, as teammates and colleagues and fans. Fans, in fact, were really important to Folksy as being part of the Bulldogs family, and so it is significant that you would be included in this time of celebration this afternoon. Most of us are still fairly numb following the news of Steve's sudden death last Tuesday. And it's still hard to believe for many of us as we remain in a state of shock. And to those who have gathered here, Stephen John Folks was known to us as Steve, as Folksy, as Presh, as Dad, as Poppy, as Pop. And each of those names will personally prompt various memories and images for us, from being a tough and determined footballer, a fitness fanatic, a Bulldogs legend and local hero, a great teammate, an inspirational model, an achiever, a disciplinarian. To others, he was known as a faithful son and brother, a smitten and devoted husband to Karen, a loving father to Hayley and Daniel, and certainly a devoted grandfather to Sydney and Hudson. Steve would be totally embarrassed by today. All this attention and focus around him. He was never one to seek accolades. He was never one to promote himself. He didn't look to have the focus upon himself, as he was always quite humble about his achievements. But today, we want to give him the send-off that he deserves. This funeral service, in a small way, seeks to encapsulate the various dimensions of his life, to honour the man who has inspired us all. And on behalf of everyone who has gathered here, and also those who are watching this online, both here in Australia and overseas, I bring our condolences to Ross and to Linda and your families in the loss of your brother, to Hayley and your husband Ben, and to Daniel on the loss of your dad, and to Sydney and to Hudson on losing your devoted Poppy and Pop, but also to the extended Moore family in losing your brother-in-law and uncle and great-uncle. So let us pray. Loving Father, thank you for all your comforting presence and understanding as we gather here in our grief. We confess that we are at a loss to understand why such a tragic incident had to happen that has taken the life of Stephen Folks. And we are confused by such a sudden death. The one thing, though, that we can be still sure of is that you love us. And you are standing here with us in our pain. In fact, you are actually carrying us through this deep valley of the shadow of death. Bear us up, Father, as we share the memories of this precious life with which you gifted us, and strengthen us as the images we share touch anew our great sense of joy in a life shared and the hurt and loss of life snatched from us. Grant that we might feel your great comfort and consolation in this needy hour. And we ask you, Lord, to sustain us and fill us with courage during this time of raw and keen grief. Thank you for your caring presence with us now, and touch our hearts anew with your gracious love. Help us to celebrate the gift of Folksy's life, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. I invite you now to focus upon the screen as we will watch a short video, a tribute to his footballing career. persons who have different aspects of Folksy's life. I'm going to invite to come to the microphone Peter Mortimer, a former teammate, Steve Price, a former Bulldogs player and team captain coached by Folksy, and Ryan Sims, Jillaroos player and previously also coached by Steve.
Firstly, an apology from my brother Steve and wife Karen. They're overseas, caught in that blizzard in northern England. They send their warmest regards to Daniel and Hayley and the whole family, and any other Bulldog supporter who's been moved by this terrible event this week. I first met Folksy here in 1978, that's 40 years ago. He was a former captain of Punch Bowl Boys High School, and he came here to make a rugby league career for himself. If Folksy set himself on doing something, he had usually achieved it. One of the first people he met was Dave Cooper, a legendary trainer, a conditioner here, and they hit it off straight away. Steve always finished 1, 2 or 3 in every drill that Dave posed. There was banter between them, and that spread throughout the whole playing group. Dave would set the bar higher and Folksy would smash it. Dave had a great knack of setting goals just beyond what we believed we could do, and then with some stern encouragement, reaching that goal became a prize. It became expected. He would set a time limit, and if one person failed to make it, we all did the penalty. He created a culture that has developed and become club standard. It even exists today. The culture is never give up, never ever let your mate down, and if you're going to do something, give it everything you've got. That whole culture emanated from Dave and Steve and the playing group we had at the time. It's great to see it's still alive. 78 was the year that the Canterbury Bankstown Rugby League Club became the Bulldogs. How appropriate. It was also Ted Glossop's first year, and his laid-back style of coaching and his ability to communicate really contributed to the club's style of play. Later that year, John Singleton arrived with his chequebook and took 8 of our most senior, experienced players to Newtown. He left George Paponis, Gary, Mark and Graham Hughes, Chris Anderson and Peter Casillas. The rest of the players making up that squad were either fresh out of school or had come down from the country. And Ted claimed all positions open, and he observed us over 12 months, picking up the weaknesses and the strengths and then combining them into a unit that was very mobile and very, very effective. The critics claimed it would take 5 years for Canterbury to recover from that raid. We played in the grand final the next year. Ted was here before the words ball security and field position became folklore. He couldn't see a reason why we couldn't score from any part on the field, and the entertainers were born. Folksy came here as a 5/8, played in his junior career. He was standing behind Gary Hughes and decided his path should be to give himself the best chance different. So we focused on one of the second row positions. He went away, lifted heavy weights. He had legal supplements to build up his weight. And he effected his tackle technique to perfection, and he won that second row spot. He had a new slogan, forwards win matches. We used to give it to him all the time about that. He had safe hands. He was fantastic on his feet and great anticipation. On the other side of the ruck was Graham Hughes, who had all the same attributes, only with a bit more bulk. Remember here at Belmore, defending against teams in their own half and waiting for them to kick the ball on the 5th. When they did, we'd all race back to a vacant part on the field, knowing that Greg Brentnell would catch the ball on the full powering forward. He would take the defence on and link with either Folksy or Graham Hughes. There'd be a series of chain passes, and more often than not, there would be a try under the posts. The statistics say Folksy scored 45 tries. I guarantee you he gave the last pass to more than double that amount. 1979, this is not going to be long, just a couple of points. 1979, we finished 6th. We played Manly on the Saturday. We swapped jerseys. Our season was over. We were preparing for Mad Monday. The next day, South beat Balmain, and we were back in the 5 again. Bullfrog had to go and find some new jerseys. Thanks to Joyce Main, we found some. We had a meeting here at Belmore before this grandstand was built. And I remember Ted Glossop saying, let's throw caution to the wind and just see how good we can be. Folksy said, bullshit, excuse me. This chance may never come again. Let's give it everything we've got and get ourselves a title. We beat West the next week 20-6, Cronulla 30-5, Parramatta 20-14, and we played St George in the grand final. 17-2 down half time. A stirring talk at half-time, and we edged our way back to 17-13. Rather than feel good about making the grand final from 5th spot, the first team to do it, it created a hunger in us. I remember Folksy saying, we're coming back here next year and we're going to win this bastard. 1980 was never going to lose. We were focused. We encouraged each other. We knew we had the ammunition. We knew we had the speed. We knew we had the fitness and the teamwork. And it was an honour to play in a game that produced one of the greatest tries in grand final history. In 2 short years, Folksy had achieved what he always wanted to achieve as a kid. Ended a 38-year drought for the Bulldogs. In 1983, Billy Johnson came down from South Brisbane, the Magpies. Billy was training to play with the Bulldogs, but he was also, we didn't find out till later, training to have a shot at the Australian middleweight title, boxing title. And he was training over and above what Dave Cooper and what the rest of the club was asking. Folksy loved this, and he went along with Billy. And it was a different style of training, and it sharpened everybody up. And they became very, very close friends. In fact, his wife Carol, Karen, and my wife Julie were inseparable, and they brought their children up together. At the end of that season, we pulled up short, and Bullfrog wisely put us down in the dressing rooms here, filled the spa bath up with beer and ice, got the caterers at the club to bring down food, and he said, just burn your energy out down there, and we were going to be safe. I happened to keep reminding Folksy of the fact that forwards win games, and we weren't playing in the grand final, so the forwards must have done something wrong. After about 12 hours of this, Billy and Folksy decided to get me down. They stripped me to my undies. They strapped, with strapping tape, my ankles and my wrists together, put it around my mouth, and put me in a cab and sent me home. I got the message, I talk too much. In 1984, Warren Ryan came to the club, and the whole focus changed. It was very, very successful, but Folksy had to change his style to get a place in that team. Warren brought some monsters with him, Peter Tunks, Peter Kelly, and Brian Batiste, and eventually Paul Dunn. But Folksy handled it easily, and we were then the dogs of war. We used to grind sides into the ground. The level of training was always that high. Success in the 1984 and 85 grand finals led to the most successful year in his personal achievements in 1986. Despite losing the grand final, he was selected to play for New South Wales in their first ever 3-0 whitewash of Queensland. He was chosen to play on the Kangaroo Tour for Australia, and he had reached the height that you can reach the highest height you can reach in rugby league. But he wasn't finished. In '88, he played with Phil Gould's side, the first grand final at Allianz Stadium, the old Sydney footy ground. In '89 and '90, he played with Hull in England, and then he came back for a testimonial year here at Belmore, very fittingly. He had 5 coaches and success with all of them. Steve Price is going to talk about that part of his career in just a minute, but just on a personal note, Folksy was a handsome man, a good style of bloke. He was honest, loyal, a great husband, a father and role model. He had these smile lines from the top of the outside of his eyes right down his cheeks to the bottom of his lips, and we didn't see them that often, but when we did, it lit up his whole face. He was kind and generous with his time, and he left us some priceless memories. Folksy, we already miss you, mate. Your life was cut way too short. At some peace knowing you with Karen. Thank you for your friendship, our memories. God bless you, mate. You're a true legend.
When I first arrived at Canterbury, I came across a guy named Terry Lamb and Steve Folks. First thing they did was give me a nickname, Ray. If anyone knows the name Ray Price at Canterbury, probably isn't held in the highest of esteems. I wasn't real sure whether that was a good or a bad thing, but as time went by, I saw that it was a good thing, in a way of a bit of respect. Had a lot to do with him, obviously through trainer. He became reserve grade coach, Super League, coached Canterbury to the Premiership up in Brizzy, and then took over from Chris Anderson in '98 when we were able to get to the grand final, beaten by Brisbane. Having a difference between Chris and Folksy, obviously with Chris you didn't have to beat him at training. Folksy, every pre-season, if you could actually beat Folksy, you knew you were in really good condition and you're going to have a really good season. I think I've done it 2 or 3 times, but I think in the last couple of times he only let me beat him, so I felt better about myself. As he went along, the club had to change a fair bit in regards to, we had some senior players retiring and things like that, so we sort of 99, we were 1 game away from a grand final. 2000 wasn't such a good year, and then 2001 we brought in a whole heap of young guys who went on to be pretty good, and he had a lot he was very good at young guys, you know, bringing them through, and didn't say much, but when he did, you knew what he was saying was important. 2002, we didn't get to do what we sort of set out to do, but had a number of meetings back here with obviously the salary cap. When CEO of the NRL at the time, David Gallup, rang us to let us know of the findings. We were here late. I got a call on the way home from Folksy. He goes, "Price, you wouldn't believe it." I said, "What, mate?" He goes, "I got pulled up by the police on the way home." I said, "Yeah." He said, "The policeman come and he says, you're going to lose 3 points, mate." Folksy said, 3 points? We just lost 37. He goes, "Another 3 is not going to make any difference." That's sort of, you know, obviously the person he is, as Parrott was saying about his right sense of humour. He set a standard. He was tough, resilient. He certainly got everything out of himself that he could, and he certainly did that with his players. And I think more so than anything in 2004, he was the biggest supporter of all the players with what boys won the comp that year was because of him. So it was a great reward for him. And as Barrett said, he never wanted recognition, but behind the scenes we always knew that was a real reason. When you've got a coach who you think the world of and you know that's going to have your back no matter what, you'll do anything for him. And that particular year, you know, you look at how the year started and how it finished, there wouldn't be too many teams or clubs that would have been able to achieve that. I'm going to finish up there. Rest in peace, Folksy. I definitely hope to catch up. I know Bullfrog will be up there, and he definitely won't have a salary cap up there. He would have already recruited.
Steve Folkes is a legend of rugby league. We've heard how accomplished and cherished he was, both as a player and a coach. And we will get to hear how beloved he was as a father, grandfather, and family man. What not many people know is the role that he played and the impact that he had on the women's game here in Australia as coach of the Gillaroos. Picture this. You accept the head coach role for a National Rugby League team. You're a premiership-winning New South Wales and Australian player and coach, proven under pressure. You arrive at your first coaching gig to be confronted with the full squad of 26 women. That's 52 eyes following your every move, hanging on your first words. But in true Folksy style, he took it in his stride, quietly, confidently, measured, and with purpose. That's how I describe the next few years under his tutelage. As time went on, he found his feet and realised we probably weren't as precious as we looked from the outset. We weren't going to break under a firm hand, but rather that we flourished under pressure, a bit like the man himself. In 2016, before the Anzac Test match in Newcastle, he asked me if he could have a little word and ushered me into a quiet area of the lobby we were staying at. I didn't know what to expect, but what I did know was I could hear the blood rushing through my ears in the short walk over to the seats, and I'd convinced myself I was getting dropped for the Test match on Saturday. I'd like to ask you to captain the Gillaroos, he said. And I stared at him for a good 30 seconds. I'm pretty sure he thought I was having a fit. He sat there with that cheeky little grin on his face, the same one he had when he knew we were about to get flogged at fitness, the same one he wore when he'd successfully talked 26 women into doing something the way that he wanted. The very same grin that when the staff at the hotel turned the music off on us during an after-match function, he ran up to his room and came sneaking back downstairs with his portable speakers under his shirt. The same grin he had when he knew whatever he was doing was going to be tough, but it was going to be worth it. Folksy brought a new level of professionalism to the Gillaroos, a huge profile and an even bigger love of the game to an already successful outfit. He will forever be a part of the Gillaroos' legacy that lives on in the fibres of the jersey that we wear with pride. On behalf of the Gillaroos, I'd like to thank not just him for his contribution, but also to his family, for allowing him the time to commit to us and share his passion for the sport that everybody here loves. We miss you already, Folksy, especially that cheeky little grin.
I'm going to invite you all to stand at this point while the current coach of the Canterbury Bulldogs, Dean Pay, the current captain, Josh Jackson, and the current CEO, Andrew Hill, will come and lay some wreaths and jersey upon the casket. Please be seated. There are now going to be three persons who have known Folksy particularly well for many, many years, who are going to bring a eulogy from each of their perspective. Alan Thompson, who was a friend since university days and was best man at Steve at Karen's wedding. Ross Folks, Steve's brother, and Hayley Folks Shaw, Steve's daughter. We welcome them to come.
When Ken just talked about turning your phones off, it reminded me of a story that Hayley and Daniel were talking about last night. I was presenting medals at the Australian Championships out at the Olympic pool, and while I was presenting the medals, my phone kept on going off. And I tried to turn it off. In those days, you didn't have silent, so it was either ringing really loud or it wasn't ringing at all. And I kept on trying to turn it off, and it couldn't happen. And when I got it off, he'd ring again and ring again. And then finally I had a look at who was calling me, Stephen Folks. So ever since that day, I've made sure I turn my phone off before. So if it does ring today, you know what's going on. It's probably Folksy calling me again. I first met Stephen in 1976, Bankstown Sports D-grade side, under 17s. I'd played soccer all my life, and I played a bit of school footy, and this was my first time playing competitive rugby league. We had a few games. Even in those days, Stephen was a student of the game, analysing your every move. Probably didn't take long to work out my game plan. I didn't mind running the ball, wasn't too keen on tackling, and my preferred position was on the blind side. Stephen took to that straight away and developed a tackling drill. He was the captain of that team, and along with the coach, developed a tackling drill that would help me become a far better defensive player, or so he thought. Formed a circle, and then someone had to break the circle, but he would always ensure that the majority of those players ran at me, so I could fix my tackling style up. Every time Stephen ran, he ran at me. And every time I got to run, he told me to run at him. He said, "Come on, Tomo, run at me." He had a few extra words in there usually, but he certainly encouraged me. My tackling improved, but it was never that great. We were premiers that year in D grade. Stephen and 4 of our players were graded with either Canterbury or Newtown. And then another couple of players were graded the following year here at Canterbury. In 1977, we started Teachers College together down at Wollongong. Because we lived close by each other, we decided that we would travel together. You certainly learn a lot about a person when you're locked in a car with them for 3 hours a day. We grew up a lot together through the formative years of our lives. In the car, lots of questions asked, lots of stories told, and lots of lessons learned. Stephen had a 1970s Cortina station wagon, and I had an EH Holden. And we nursed those cars through those years of Teachers College, often having to decide on the mornings as we drove down to Wollongong whether we'd pay the 20-cent toll or drive on the Princess Highway. Many times we drove on the Princess Highway because we wanted to save our $1 a week. We learned a lot about music. We both liked music, but the rules were if whosever car you were in, they chose the music. So we'd listen to Peter Frampton, Fleetwood Mac and Boston in Stephen's car. And then we'd listen to Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple and Black Sabbath in my car. Neither of us were happy with all the different musics, but we learned a lot. We learned a lot of music, and we certainly learned to appreciate each other's tastes. Later on during our college time, Stephen must have got a new contract because he bought a brand new lime green Toyota Celica. It was a very loud car and created great attention. Everyone noticed it. One night after a function down in Wollongong, we were driving home, and for some reason, I'm not sure why, we both wore our Speedos home. And we got all the way from Wollongong and we got onto the Canterbury Road, where unfortunately we were pulled up by a police car. He got us out of the car once he saw what we were wearing and stood us on the middle of Canterbury Road. Many cars driving past, even at 2 a.m. in the morning, while they checked Stephen's licence and registration. I often wondered, the people who drove past, I wonder who they thought looked the best in their Speedos. I think I know the answer to that. Our social lives were every Friday night at the Canterbury Leagues Club. It was a great meeting place for many, many people in the local area, and we certainly enjoyed our times there. Most of the football boys strategically placed themselves leaning on Bullfrog's office at the back of the auditorium, placed between the bar and the toilet. 1 a.m. closes at those days, and at 1 a.m. the biggest decision of the night had to be made. Where were we going next? And usually 3 choices were the popular choices. It was either the Ponderosa Pizza Parlour down in Beverly Hills, the Cooperage at Dulwich Hill, or the Sundowner on Canterbury Road and Punchbowl Road, straight opposite Stephen's place. Many times we ended up at the Sundowner till all hours of the night. Whilst we were at college too, one of our good mates, Greg Sankey, who also played in that Bankstown sports team and also played here at the Bulldogs, his mum and dad were English and they went back to England, and Sankey looked for a few housemates for a while. So Stephen and I put our hand up and we all moved in together under the watchful eye of Sank's older sister, cracking the whip with us to make sure that we behaved ourselves. First time out of home, again, a lot of lessons were learned as we tried to feed ourselves, tried to understand what was going on in our lives, and learned about washing and ironing. There was a huge mat in the lounge room of Sankey's place, and that was where our jeans got ironed. The rules of the house were you had to walk across that mat 10 times a day to make sure the jeans got ironed, ready for Friday night at the Leagues Club. Sank would always wonder that he was a rotogravure. I don't even know if they have those anymore. Sank was a rotogravure, and he left for work every morning at 6 o'clock while Folksy and I were still in bed asleep. He'd come home in the afternoon, and usually Folksy and I were in bed again, still having a sleep, and he'd often wondered if we really did go to college and learn to be teachers, or we just stayed at home sleeping all day. Our weddings were a couple of years apart, and we were both, quite young in today's standards, 21 and 23 when we got married, and we were both in each other's bridal parties. Stephen's Bucks night, we ended up at the Bourbon and Beefsteak up at the Cross. I think it's called the Bourbon now, where most Bucks nights ended in those days. One stage, quite late in the night, we were asked to leave. We didn't really want to leave, we were having a good time. Then the police arrived and they took away the loudest in the group. Anyway, as they were loading Folksy into the paddy wagon, he called to us, "Call Punchy," which we did. We got on the phone to Punchy and he said, just walk down to Darlinghurst Police Station. Everything will be all right when you get there. I said, "Okay, mate, no worries." So we walked down to Darlinghurst Police Station. We walk in the door, expecting to have a discussion about how we were going to get Stephen out of the police station. No, but there he was, sitting with the Crown Sergeant at the front desk having a cup of coffee. The Sergeant did suggest to us that it was time to go home and we should leave. Lucky there was no mobile phones in those days and no integrity unit, As we matured, our families grew, Our priorities and social activities change as they do. We have many great New Year's Eve parties at Chipping Norton with the kids, the families, the fireworks, the pool, the slide, the spa. One night I counted 36 kids in the spa at one time. And we had lots of chats at my bar there. For a period of time we were both travelling the world. Stephen with the Windies and me with the swimming team. We tried often to catch up. It didn't always work, but when it did, we made that time count. There was one day where I had a day off in Manchester and Stephen was playing down in Birmingham against the English. So I caught a train down to go and watch the team play. John Dyson was the coach of that team as well, and John was my PE teacher at school, so it was a bit of a reunion. Good to see those guys and good to hear the stories that Stephen had about his challenges with the West Indian cricket team. Being both coaches, we often talked about how we did things and what we did and how we do it. One of the questions I asked him one day is, how do you get up every week with a team talk and inspire the players to play? How do you get 24 of those a year and really make a difference to the people you're talking to? He'd say to me, how do you do it 8 days in a row at the Olympics? He said, that's got to be hard too. You know, you don't even get a rest in between. You've got to do it 8 days in a row. There were a lot of challenges with our coaching, and we talked a lot about the things that worried us, and we swapped stories and ideas. He certainly talked a lot about his challenges with the West Indies cricket team, who were probably at polar opposites to him in their attitude towards training. And we had a lot of conversations, in particular around the difficult times experienced in 2002, 2004, 2008 and 2013. In recent times, Stephen has spent a lot of time with his grandkids, Sydney and Hudson. I know Poppy and Pop is loved dearly by them, and I know they mean the world to him. He wouldn't trade his babysitting duties for anything. The family's thoughts are also with Jodie in this difficult time. Jodie, we thank you for the company you provided Stephen over the last 3 years, and we will be forever grateful. I was lucky to know Stephen, not just the way a lot of you saw him, the footy player and the footy coach, but the one behind those personas, the friend, the mate, the husband, the dad, the Poppy and Pop. I walked through here the other day and once again saw the Bulldogs' values on the wall. Tough, resilient, family. This is Stephen to a T. His personal values represent the culture of this great club, and this was how he lived his life. There's a lot of people look for a lot of descriptions of people, but quite simply, Stephen was a great mate and a good bloke.
Stephen John Folks, our brother, our best mate, our idol. Born in Paddington on the 31st of January 1959. Second son to John and Dell, brother to Ross and Linda. He attended Bankstown South Infant School before going to Punchbowl Primary School. His high school years were spent at Punchbowl Boys High, where in sixth form he was voted school captain. We should have known from an early age what Steve was like. I remember when he was about 6, a boy pushed in on me in a line to get onto the school bus. Steve grabbed him, threw him to the ground and jumped on him. It took 2 men and a garden hose to get him off. He was always the one to have your back. Fear was not a word he knew. It was around this time that Dad, who was his biggest influence, began to teach us to tackle in our backyard at Punchbowl. I can still remember him saying, "They can't run without legs. Get in underneath and drive up." Steve followed his instructions to a T. Our little sister Lindy got dragged from pillar to post with cricket in the summer and football in the winter. Steve used to tease her and call her roly-poly. She would get bored and Mum would give her money to go to the canteen, probably 10 trips a game. As she grew up, she followed him religiously and hardly ever missed a game. He was a good student, but hated music classes. After a broken arm through football, he kept his cast in his school bag. Every time it was music, he would put the cast on and wrap a bandage around it. This went on for months until Mum got a whiff of it and made him throw it out. He heard one day that if he went to the school swimming trials, he would get the afternoon off. A good idea, he thought. He went in the 50-metre backstroke, which he had never done before, and won the event. Next he went to the zone, which he also won, and then went on to the combined high schools and finished second. Not a bad effort for just an afternoon off. We both worked at the drive-thru at the St George Hotel, Belmore, a couple of nights a week after school. His last day of sixth form he had to work. I must have decided to have a couple of staffies after work to celebrate. I was at home asleep when I remember someone waking me up. I opened my eyes and there was an attractive blonde woman who I recognised as a young teacher from school. I thought my luck had changed. She said I had to come with her as Steve had had a couple too many and was asleep at the pub and couldn't drive home. I went with her and poured him into the car and drove him home. He never told me the full story, but I have my theories. Steve was also a very good cricketer. As a 10-year-old playing for Bankstown Sports, he had an average of over 80 for the season. He only got out once. He also held a Green Shield bowling record with Bankstown, which stood for many years. One day at Punchbowl Park in a school game, we were batting on an absolute road. Myself and the other opener put on nearly 200 before he got out. Steve was next in and strode through the gate, ready to have some fun and tear them apart. He didn't realise until I passed him walking out that I'd declared and he wasn't going to get his chance. I don't think I ever saw him so dirty. He threw his bat and we didn't talk for a little while, but I thought it was funny. All his junior football was played with Bankstown Sports, right up until he went to grade. He was always a 5'8" in juniors, but played half and fullback as well in the lower grades of Canterbury. In later years, he also played as lock, 5'8", second row and hooker in first grade. Not a bad effort. I remember the Sporties weekly booklet, which came out with match reports and best and fairest points. An early manager was Fred Anderson, who also played with Canterbury and Souths. He wrote, "Steve Folks, 3 points. Everyone has a bad game, but I'm yet to see this kid have one." A later report that year said that Steve had had 3 opportunities to score, but on every occasion tripped and fell with a line wide open. He called me Jonah. I went to a grand final, they lost. I went to a state of origin, they lost. Wasn't game to go to a test. I went to Belmore Oval one day to watch them play St George. I was sitting in the Steve Mortimer bar, watching the game, when for the first and last time ever, Steve received his marching orders. He trudged back to the sheds and after a shower, came upstairs. He walked up to me and in his own special way said, "I thought you'd be here somewhere." After the 79 grand final loss, Steve and the team went out for a big night. He arrived home late the next day, looking the worse for wear. Mum had bought him a new shirt for the night and every button had been ripped off. She wasn't impressed. Steve stood there with a big grin on his face and opened his hand. There are all the buttons. He had picked them up and held on to them for the whole night. Mum wasn't a big fan of tattoos, and after I think it was the '88 grand final, all the players decided to get a bulldog tattoo on their backsides. Mum wasn't any the wiser until he bent over to dive into their pool with a pair of Speedos on one Christmas day. The tats stood out like you know what. Steve was a big car fan and at different times had a Porsche Carrera and a Mitsubishi Starion, which he was so proud of. He recently purchased a new Honda, which he loved. We were at Kiama having lunch with our sister Linda, and he was showing me the car, as proud as punch. We left for Sydney, me and my Ford, him in his Honda. By the time I got to the top of Mount Ousley, he was nowhere to be seen. I sent him a text when I got home. Hey bro, were you broken down? I was going to stop and help out, but I couldn't see you in the mirrors. His reply was, just running it in, so I have to keep it under 3,000 RPMs. And with my 7-speed paddle shift, I was just coasting while I listened to my 100-watt 8-speaker stereo. And it was just nice in the 19.5-degree climate-controlled cabin. Didn't even have the sunroof open it. All that while using unleaded petrol and only using 6 litres per 100 kilometres. But thanks for asking. Yes, Steve was a great footballer, but he was an even better person, and a devoted father to Hayley and Daniel, and an amazing grandfather to Sydney and Hudson. The tributes that are poured in and the crowd here today are a testimony to that. You will be sorely missed, my mate, by all that you touched. Precious by name, precious by nature. Rest in peace, little brother. Well played, player folks. Thank you.
Dan and I grew up in this very grandstand we all sit in today. It was our life, our Bulldogs family. We have so many memories here, so even though we question whether Dad would like all this fuss, we wanted to give him the send-off he so richly deserves. While most of you know Dad as the player, coach, club man, it is really important to my brother and I for you all to know the husband, father, grandfather, because they were the titles he was most proud of. Firstly, the husband. I remember Dad telling me the story of the first time he laid eyes on Mum across the dance floor at Canterbury Leagues. He said she immediately grabbed his attention with her long blonde hair and cute backside. It took him a couple of weeks to pluck up the courage to ask her out, probably because of the way she looked, but also because she was the boss's daughter. In true Dad style, for their first date, he took her to play squash. He told me after that day, he knew she was the one. Mum and Dad were the epitome of the saying, opposites attract. Mum was the life of the party, Dad the quietly confident man in the corner. Mum the risk taker, Dad the sensible decision maker. Mum the talker, Dad the thinker. As parents, he was the hard line, she the comforter, but they were the perfect complement. Chalk and cheese, yet peas and carrots. They adored each other to the very core, and that was evident for everyone to see. After losing Mum, Dad had a sadness about him. While he appreciated his life and everyone in it, we all knew that he longed for Mum. He softened, he wasn't afraid to show his emotions, and we all saw a different side to him. Despite the circumstances, it was beautiful to watch. Dad had always been happy to stay home while Mum went out and socialised, but this was different. He knew she wasn't coming home to him. He missed their simple life, their nights in, mum drinking scotch and coke, dad drinking red wine, their daily 5:30 p.m. coffees on the lounge watching Hot Seat. And that is how I would like to think they have been spending their first week back together. The way Dad cared for Mum in her final days with such compassion and tenderness was a testament to the fact that he believed that she was the most remarkable person he had ever known. And we have no doubt that Mum is repaying the favour as he crosses over to the other side, wherever that may be. They were the loves of each other's lives. Growing up, Dad and I were really close. I wasn't a typical daddy's girl. He was the rule maker and disciplinarian, but I had a deep-seated respect for him. I knew my dad was a good man, and I was proud beyond words. As I grew up, I ended up having really similar interests to Dad. I followed him to Wollongong University and did a Bachelor of Physical Education more than 20 years after he did. We would sit at the kitchen table and have discussions about anatomy and physiology. Dan and Mum would call us nerds, but we didn't care. We loved it. Like they say is often the case, I ended up marrying a man that was exactly like my father. Ben and Dad became really close over the 14 years we have been together, and I know Dad took great comfort in the fact that I was being looked after by Ben in the same way that he had looked after me. Dad and I's relationship took on a whole new level when Mum passed away. We became even closer and didn't go longer than a day without speaking. We shared a love for wine and would sit outside by the fire at our place and solve the world's problems. I will miss his dry sense of humour. I will miss his advice. I will miss his smile and laugh. But mostly I will miss his love, the kind of love a daughter gets from her dad that she can get from no one else. Dan and Dad bonded over music. As far as father and sons go, they could not have been more different in personality, but music was their common language. They both have it in their soul. While I have been making logistical decisions all week, Dan focused on the music. Every song you hear today has been specifically chosen by him with meaning. Dad's favourite band was Pearl Jam, and he and Dan went to 3 concerts together. Dan remembers at one of them, Dad got so in the zone, he whipped out the ultimate dance move, the air guitar. Anyone who knows Dad knows that he wasn't much for showing moves like that, so Dan was understandably surprised. But he didn't want to say anything for fear of Dad realising that he was out of his comfort zone. So Dan just sat back and enjoyed it. A few months later, while they were reminiscing about the concert, Dan said, "Remember how you were doing the air guitar, Dad?" To which he replied very matter-of-factly, "No, I didn't." Dad was never good at admitting that he had the capability to let his hair down, even if it was every once in a while. Dad became the poppy to my children that he was never supposed to be. I was 7 months pregnant with Sydney when we lost Mum in 2013. So when I had her a couple of months later, Dad did what Dad has always done in every facet of his life. He stepped up. We often joke that if Mum was around, she would have taken control and Dad would have been on the sideline. She would have been chief babysitter, nappy changer, lolly giver, and the ultimate spoiler. Instead, Dad was all of those things and so much more. When Sydney came along, it was an emotional time. We had lost Mum 10 weeks earlier, and Sydney was the bright light we all desperately needed. My husband Ben and I, as well as Dan, were living with Dad at the time, so we brought her home from the hospital to Dad's house. Dad was in the trenches with us in those early weeks. He was my coffee maker, he was my spare pair of hands when I needed a shower. He bathed her, he rocked her to sleep. He declared Little Ray of Sunshine her song and sung it to her daily. But most importantly, he loved on her and he bonded with her in a way that most poppies don't. Looking at her broke his heart and healed it all at the same time. That bond grew and grew over the next almost 5 years as she started to be able to give him that love right back. He would pick her up and take her for strawberry milkshakes, something that I was never allowed in my sugar-free childhood. As she got older, the circus became their thing. Every time she saw the big top being set up at Miranda Park, she would immediately demand to call Poppy to let him know they had a date. When the time would come, she would sit out the front deck and wait for him. He would come and pick her up and off they would go. They would return home a few hours later with many toys, show bags, and tickets from every riding game. A lot poorer in money, but so much richer in memories. I certainly am dreading the next time the circus comes to town. But knowing she will have those memories forever makes the heartache worthwhile. Poppy loved you, Sid, so much. You put his heart back together. Then in 2015, I fell pregnant again with Hudson. After the timing around Sydney's birth, we often joked that the second child would struggle to grab our hearts like she did. We could not have been more wrong, especially when it came to Dad. He was thrilled when I gave birth to a little boy just before Christmas. It didn't take long for them to be best mates, and I mean that in every sense of the words. Even if Ben or I was in the room, he only had eyes for Pop. As he started to string words together, his favourite phrase was, "Pop house keys." Today, towards the end of last year, a few hours after Ben flew out for a weekend away with the boys, Sydney fell ill with a bad bug. Knowing I was in for a long day and night with her, I rang Dad straight away and asked if he'd come and get Huddy for a little while. When he turned up on my doorstep 10 minutes later, I threw an overnight bag and a porta cot at him, handed him Hudson and said, "Thanks, Dad, see you tomorrow." The 24-hour bug turned into 72 hours. Each morning I would speak with him and he would ask how Sid was. When I told him she was no better, he would say, "No worries, I'll keep Hutto until she's good." In the end, the little while turned into a 3-night boys bender hangover style. When I asked Dad what they got up to, he said, "What happens on tour stays on tour." The thought that I would never see Hudson run down the hallway, yelling "Pop," as he catches a glimpse of Dad's car pull up out the front, is probably what has saddened me most in the last week. But I promise you, Dad, he will always know that you were his first and lifelong best mate. The afternoon before Dad passed away, he popped over to see the kids. They played hide and seek, trampoline, and running races in the backyard. Dad said he was leaving. The kids begged him to stay, as they always did. He sweetened the deal by promising to play them a song in his car that they could dance to on the front deck. He chose Sid's fave, Bruno Mars' "That's What I Like," and pumped it through the speakers. The kids and I's last memory of Dad will be him laughing at them dancing as he drove away. Sid and Hud were the last people on this earth to see Dad, and I will cherish that for the rest of my life. The void that has been left in my children's lives by both the loss of Mum and now Dad is a gaping hole that I know we will never fill, no matter how hard we try. But we will certainly do our best to make sure that they know just how loved they were and are, and we will continue to ensure that Mum and Dad will always have a huge presence in their lives. So apparently, after 34 years together and 30 years of marriage, Mum and Dad decided that 4 years and 364 days apart was more than either of them could handle. And while the events of the last week have rocked us to our core, and we know we'll never be the same, that is providing us with the tiny beacon of light we need to carry us through. Sydney summed it up perfectly on Tuesday afternoon when she said, "I know Poppy has gone to the Star with Nanny, and I know she will look after him, but I really thought he was going to stay with us." Trust me, Sid, we all did. To use the words that Dad used as he farewelled Mum at her funeral 5 years ago tomorrow, "Life with you has been an absolute privilege."
So good.
Can I draw your attention again to the screen as we will see a family tribute.
Don't ask me what you know is true. Don't have to tell you I love your precious heart. I was standing, you were there, two worlds collided, and they could never tear us apart. We could live for 1,000 years, but if I hurt you, I make wine from your tears. I told you that we could fly, 'cause we all have wings, but some of us don't know why. I was standing, you were there, two worlds collided, and they could never, ever tear us apart. I was standing, you were there, two worlds collided, and they could never tear us apart. You were standing, I was there, two worlds collided, and they could never tear us apart. I was standing. I was stumbling around blind, like a wreck I came to you. So I staggered through the night, seeking out your rescue blue. Gonna burn your name right across the sky, so I never forget what the feeling's like. Gonna burn your name right across the sky, so I never forget what the feeling's like. I want every single
whose lives have been deeply touched by Folksy. Some of us more remotely, others as teammates and colleagues, some in the closeness of family life and friendship. And as we have listened and watched the tributes to his life taken so from us, how might we respond in the face of his death? As we bring this towards a close, there are just three things I want to mention. The first thing is the need to be thankful. All of us have memories, recollections of Folksy. Many of them are long-standing from the intimacy of family life. For some, from his circle of many friends and teammates over the many years. Others as fans, watching, applauding, and being inspired. And we are grateful for those many things that we have already mentioned this afternoon and which have aroused all kinds of other memories within us. What we do need to do is to take opportunity to thank God for the person whose life we shared and who has made those memories possible. Over the past week, lots of things have been said and lots of things could be said. Lots of memories have been evoked. And I want to encourage all of us to continue to take out those memories, particularly the personal ones, which have been triggered today, and share them with each other. Sometimes we'll cry. Other times we will laugh. But we will honour him by sharing them. And we give thanks to God for the person who made those memories possible. Keep those memories alive. Continue to talk and share them with each other. The second thing is that we need human. Someone whom you deeply loved and respected greatly has died. And you'll see him no longer. Someone you counted on has gone. Someone who was your rock is no more. And in that there is pain and loss and hurt. And it must be because we loved. And the pain and the loss and the hurt and the despair, we ask why? Why him? Funerals cause us to face such questions as that. But these are the few opportunities that we have to share our humanness with one another. Our pain, our loss, our questions, our despair, our frailties, and our vulnerabilities. We don't need to hide those feelings, pretending they're not there because we need to be tough or whatever. But with a word or a touch or an act of kindness, we need to admit and to tell each other that I hurt, and I know you hurt. I feel for you, and I wish it was otherwise. We will all grieve in our own particular ways, and will be different from one another. Too often we don't say the things we need to say because we're too busy, or we think we don't know how to show strength, or we're embarrassed or afraid. Afraid that we'll say the wrong thing, afraid we won't know what the right or clever thing is to say. There is no right thing. There is no clever thing to say. Nothing we say can change the reality of the sadness and grief we feel. But even in our fumbled words and in our practical helps, it's a way of standing beside each other during our time of grief. And through all of that, particularly those of us who are people of faith, God, who knows the depths of love and grief and pain beyond any other, stands alongside and brings us hope in the midst of despair and pain. And the third thing is to be challenged. Steve's death has challenged us all. None of us expected him to die so young. But his death reminds us that we need to make every day count, for we don't know what tomorrow will bring. That is how Folksy lived his life. We've heard how he was the consummate trainer who gave 100% to everything he did as if there was no tomorrow. A work ethic like no other, and how he never gave up. Yet he gave equally to those who were close to around him, and particularly his family. He knew the importance of relationships and sought to maintain and invest in them, of loyalty, of perseverance to those with whom he worked and lived. We know he wasn't perfect, but he has been an inspiration to us all, whether we are footballers, family, friends or fans. The lives of all of us run their course and finish, sooner or later, suddenly or in the fullness of time. None of us knows the amount of time that God has given us for which we need to make the most. Life is a gift from God, not just for our own enjoyment and our own pleasure, but also to serve him and each other, and to invest in the lives of others, particularly those who are close to us. Let me lead us in prayer. Lord, as we've come now,
Honestly, it's like a G-spot between mortgages.
Well, just so you know, I'm not looking for your house or anything.
So it's a car.
Why do I care about your car?
It's an $80,000.
the rest. Our love and our admiration for him reminds us that your bringing us together in community today gives us both support and pain.
Fuck's sake.
Our being parted from him reminds us both of our frailty and your enduring love. We thank you that our love and respect for Steve draws us together today and gives us a new appreciation of each other and of the beauty and the fragility of relationships which mirror your grace and goodness to us. As we have looked back over Steve's life, we thank you for those rich and true experiences that we have received from him, and may he continue to live with us. We give thanks for the way that he has touched our lives in so many ways. And so, Father, we are in your hands. We want to open ourselves to you. We give thanks that he was such a person, that our sorrow now is so real and our loss so great. Help us through his death to see more deeply into the meaning of his life and our own, and to grasp more firmly the hope that life is longer than our years. But also now the chair of the football club board to bring a word to us.
Oh, destroyed straight away. Thank you very much. This week has been a week of pain and shock, but Hayley and Danley really wanted me to say thank you. There's been so much kindness to our immediate families who literally dropped everything to be there with them. One of the great pluses is a big family. Thank you, Mum and Dad. Each of us has played a role since then, but I especially wanted to point out, in particular, the Ward family. Julie and Gary, your quiet strength in those first 24, 48 hours. Jacob, for giving us the beautiful slideshow with one arm, basically, all weekend. To the many beautiful friends who've also been there, especially Emma and Will Johnson. You guys jumped on planes and came down straight away to be there for Hayley and Dan. And Ken, you also jumped on a plane. I can't think of anyone more pertinent to officiate this service today. You know, you gave so much time over the years to both Karen and Stephen, and we're really, really grateful for your beautiful service today. We know
And why haven't you told this person that you're in a committed relationship?
Her name's Amy.
you're a great man to Stephen's always, and again you showed that this week.
Well, if that's the case, then
To all of our speakers and the pallbearers, it's not an easy ask when I call you for that, so thank you so much. To the players today and in the past week who have reached out, both current and former, this is who we are. Thank you. To the football club staff, you've just been incredible. I know from experience, you know, the week leading into the first game of the competition is tough. Add another layer that we're playing over in Perth, and then to be asked to give us, you've planned and you've delivered an amazing service today. We won't forget that. And Andrew, you're only really new to us, but you're truly one of us. Thank you. And finally, to the wonderful Bulldogs fans and the broader rugby league community, your support and love and respect over the last 6 days has just been overwhelming. It's a gift to our families at a time when we really needed it most. Thank you, everyone.
We're just going to have a bit of music. It's going to play for a moment. And while that is playing,
over 6 weeks.
I would like to invite to the front Folksy's former teammates and coaches, as well as those whom he coached and who worked alongside of him in his coaching
The relationship.
roles, that they might come and form a guard of honour from the casket to the hearse, in readiness in a moment for his casket to be escorted to the hearse. So while the music plays, former players, those that he's coached and worked alongside of him, I invite you to come onto the field.
Darling, you're with me, always around me. Oh, come on, love, watch me fall apart.
What are you going to do, Mia? Call every woman I've ever known just to announce that I'm now in a committed relationship? Hi, sure.
Fuck's
this
wrong?
is Charlie Harper. We met at Disneyland about 22 years ago. Yeah, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. That was me. Anyway, I just thought I should let you know I have a girlfriend now. So I'd appreciate it if you didn't call. Okay, bye-bye.
Oh, and in the shadows we'll song in the deep. Oh, and in the shadows we'll song. Darling, you're with me, always around me. Only love, only love. Darling, I feel you under my body. Oh. Give me shelter, show me all.
stand. In a moment, the casket will be carried to the hearse to the sounds of
I got no lifeboats, no life preservers, no waterways. If the ship goes down, I'm going down with it. So there's no longer any reason to put off you and me getting naked and run like a couple of pigs.
Johnny, I'd like you to meet my parents.
better man. Then once the hearse begins its journey across the ground towards the southern exit, as a final tribute, I'd ask that you will join with me in giving him a Bulldog's spiritual home for the last time. I'll indicate what we want you to do.
She lies and says she's enough. Can't find a better man. She dreams in color, she dreams in red. Can't find a better man. Can't find a better man. Can't find a better man.
maybe we could spend a little time getting to know each other.
What do you want to know?
Well, do you have any brothers or sisters?
Do not. How about you?
Well, Charlie.
All right, Charlie.
Do you like to read?
Oh yeah, I love you.
Oh, great, me too. Read anything good lately?
You mean like books and magazines, not billboards and text messages, right?
Yeah.
Then no. Do menus count? Are you ready for me?
Yeah. Already, more ready, and be done.
Oh.
Shoot, I'm sorry, you okay?